A Hollywood star from the billion-dollar Fast and Furious franchise is suddenly in the headlines and not for making a movie. Atlanta police say that Tyrese Gibson's dogs killed a neighbor's pet, and now the question is whether he could be facing jail. Meet Henry, an adorable 5-year-old King Charles Spaniel. Police say that Henry was mauled and killed on September 18th when Tyrese Gibson's dogs got loose. They say Tyrese promised to turn himself in to face the music, but instead he left town. So, what exactly happened and how did it turn into criminal charges against Tyrese Gibson? That's what we're going to look at today. Tyrese Gibson lives in this gorgeous mansion in Buckhead, a posh neighborhood in Atlanta, Georgia. Harrison Parker lives across the street. On September 18th, 2025, at 10:04 p.m., Harrison Parker let his dog Henry out into the front yard. Parker says Henry loved to go outside, loved to play in the yard, and the yard has an invisible fence, so Henry always stayed in his own yard. 3 minutes later, at 10:07 p.m., Parker went to let Henry back in the house, but Henry did not come running to the door. Parker went out to find Henry, and what he discovered was heartbreaking. Parker found the dog's body lying in a heap in the driveway. Parker said it was nothing more than just a little pile of fluff. Henry had been viciously attacked. The Fulton County Animal Services incident report says that little Henry had broken ribs, puncture wounds, severe internal bleeding, and was covered in slobber. Henry weighed about 30 pounds. Parker believes he was attacked by not just one, but four cane corsos owned by Tyrese Gibson. A neighbor told WSB TV that each of the cane corsos weighed over 100 pounds, more than 3 times what little Henry weighed. Henry never stood a chance. And ironically, Parker says that Henry already was a little afraid of other dogs. He told News Channel 11 Alive, "I can't imagine the fear he felt as they killed him." Parker was devastated, obviously, at the loss of his pet. He told WSB TV, "Not hearing him around is just awful. He was one of the sweetest dogs, and to have him murdered it's indescribable." Even before Parker called, police had already gotten a call about the dogs congregating around another neighbor's front door, and their Ring camera captured video footage of four dogs, believed to be the same four who attacked and mauled Henry. As we dive into the legal problems that Gibson's facing, could you please take a minute to like the video and subscribe? We'd love to have you back for more. Fulton County Police let Gibson know that he would be facing misdemeanor charges and that he would have to turn the dogs over to animal control. So let's take a look at the legal charges that Tyrese Gibson is facing. The police filed an affidavit for arrest that tells us exactly what the charge against Tyrese Gibson is. Here it is. It's from Nicole Dwyer with the police, and she files it under oath, and she says that Tyrese Darnell Gibson, hereinafter called the accused, between 9/18/2025 at 10:04 p.m. and 9/18/2025 at 10:07 p.m. at Atlanta in Fulton County aforesaid, did commit the offense of cruelty to animals misdemeanor. That's count number one. And she cites the Georgia statute 1612-4B. In that, said accused knowingly and intentionally, that's part of the claim, did cause physical pain, suffering, and death to an animal by any unjustifiable act or omission by allowing his four cane corso dogs to run at large throughout his neighborhood more than 5 times over the past 5 months. And on 9/18/2025, while the four cane corsos were out loose, they killed a friendly neighborhood dog named Henry while Henry was on his own property. Henry sustained broke ribs and had severe internal bleeding. And then it's signed under oath. So, what about that statute that the arrest warrant is talking about. What is that statute about? Let's look at 1612.4 and look at what animal cruelty means under Georgia law. Here's the statute, and Tyrese is charged under Section B as someone who causes physical pain, suffering, or death to an animal by any unjustifiable act or omission. Now, it's a misdemeanor. And of course, a misdemeanor is considered less serious than a felony. But misdemeanor is not the same thing as no jail. It's not the same thing as no big deal. In Georgia, it could mean a fine and even potential prison time, but typically far under a year, sometimes no prison time at all. Now, if Tyrese Gibson has been convicted of a similar crime in the past, if he had another charge for cruelty to animals in the past, the charge could be upped to a misdemeanor of a high and aggravated nature. But I'm not aware of anything like that. I'm not aware of anyone suggesting that Gibson had ever been charged with anything like this before in the past. So Georgia law does have a felony charge for aggravated cruelty to animals, but authorities did not charge Tyrese Gibson with that. They charged him with the misdemeanor that I just read to you, not a felony. Gibson supposedly agreed to turn himself in, but authorities say that when they showed up at his house on September 22nd to execute a warrant, he was gone. And he posted on his Instagram that he was in Dubai for a mental health break and won't be back until November. And that, of course, could constitute another legal problem for Tyrese Gibson. So, what exactly is the evidence against Tyrese? Now, according to interviews with neighbors, this was by no means the first time the dogs had gotten loose. In fact, police say that Tyrese's dogs have been loose in the neighborhood at least 5 times in previous months. Back on April 20th, someone reported 3 adult cane corsos and 9 puppies were running around the neighborhood. Animal control says they warned Tyrese Gibson that he was going to need a permit if he had more than 10 dogs. Another neighbor reported that 4 of the dogs sat on her step and pinned her inside her home, that she was afraid to go outside. And animal control, of course, got a call about 4 of Tyrese Gibson's dogs just before Harrison Parker called in the attack on Henry. Tyrese Gibson has apologized through his lawyer. He says he wasn't at home at the time Henry was attacked. Here's what the lawyer said. Mr. Tyrese Gibson extends his deepest condolences to the family who lost their beloved dog to this tragic incident that occurred while Mr. Gibson was away from his home. Upon learning of this unfortunate accident, Mr. Gibson immediately made the difficult decision to rehome his dogs to a safe and loving environment. Concerning the misdemeanor warrant, Mr. Gibson is cooperating fully with authorities to address and resolve this matter responsibly. Mr. Gibson asked for privacy and understanding as this matter is handled through the appropriate legal channels and as he remains committed to the safety of his community and the well-being of all animals. And that's potential legal problem number 3 for Tyrese Gibson, because Gibson was not supposed to rehome the dogs. He was supposed to turn them over. Now, authorities don't know where the dogs are, and they don't even know whether they're still all together in a group. And that's the problem. Harrison Parker says, yes, he wants justice for Henry, but he told a local news station that, more importantly, I just don't want this to happen again. And if authorities don't know where the dogs are, they can't prevent future attacks and they can't even warn people. Now, the criminal charges against Tyrese Gibson are a little unusual. Typically, dog bite cases are civil cases where the person who gets bitten sues the dog owner. And that, of course, could still happen. There could still be a civil case. Parker said he was considering suing for the loss of Henry. Rules about dog bite cases differ from state to state. In many states, dog owners are liable if their dogs bite someone, and that's just strict liability. That's it. If the dog bites, the owner's liable. Now, notice I'm saying liable, and that's a civil issue. That means it has to do with how much money someone would get. That's different from facing criminal charges. Georgia belongs to a minority of states that use what's called the one free bite rule. Dog owners are liable if they know that a dog has dangerous tendencies. On a first bite, the owner might not have realized that the dog was dangerous. But once a dog has already bitten someone, the dog owner is presumed to now know that the dog could be dangerous, and the dog owner then would be responsible, which could explain why Tyrese made a point of telling in one interview that until this incident, the dogs had never harmed a child or person or another dog. But the one bite rule probably isn't going to help Tyrese Gibson here because it doesn't apply to dogs that are off the leash and running loose. Let's look at OCGA 5127, the statute. The first talks about danger, and by the way, it's to humans, not to other animals. But in the second sentence, it talks about improving vicious propensity. It shall be sufficient to show that the animal was required to be at heel or on a leash by an ordinance of a city, county, or consolidated government, and the said animal was, at the time of the occurrence, not at heel or on a leash. Put in simpler terms, the first time you might not know, and that might not be your responsibility. But if the animal is supposed to be on a leash and is not, then at that point, that's enough to prove that the animal was dangerous because you weren't following the ordinance that required you to put the animal on a leash. So that won't be any protection for Tyrese Gibson in a civil lawsuit. Authorities are charging Tyrese criminally, though, not just civilly. And I'm guessing that almost certainly the reason they took that step was because of how frequently the dogs got out and how dangerous they do appear to be. You may be wondering, if authorities get hold of Tyrese Gibson's dogs, what's going to happen to them? Will they be euthanized? Now, Tyrese Gibson says they had never hurt a human. That's no comfort, of course, to Parker or to Henry, but it does make a difference under the law. Under Georgia Code Section 4826, a dog that has caused a serious injury to a human on more than one occasion shall be euthanized. And shall is the legal term for must, meaning it has to happen. That's what the judge has to rule. There's not any discretion. He doesn't get to pick something different. But if Gibson is correct that the dogs have never hurt a human, that statute wouldn't apply. Instead, the court would probably look to a different code section, 4823, which says a court can order a dog euthanized if the dog has seriously injured a human or presents a danger to humans not suitable for control. And the court would have to decide whether the dogs constitute a danger to humans. Probably Fulton County will argue that they do because they ganged up on a smaller dog. And imagine then what risk they might pose to a small child playing out in the yard. And Fulton County would also point to the neighbor who said that she felt pinned in her own home because they were congregated on her porch and she was afraid to go out. So a court is going to have to make that call as to whether or not the dogs must be euthanized. And the court is also going to be asking the hard question, were the dogs trained to be dangerous? In footage released from Dope Boy TV on September 6th, now this is 12 days before Henry was attacked, Tyrese is playing with his dogs in the yard and he calls them his babies.
Look at my baby. Look at my baby.
You can see he clearly cares deeply about his dogs. But what is really raising eyebrows is this part of the video.
Anybody comes to this house, I want you to bite their ankles off. When you bite the ankles off, I want you to leave the ankles at my front door. You got me? All right. I know you do. Love you.
So although they were clearly Gibson's pets, he also suggests they were intended to protect him by biting if necessary. Of course, biting intruders is nothing remotely similar to biting neighbors' children or pets like Henry in their own yards. In a recent statement to WSB, Tyrese Gibson said he had spent 40 years as a dog lover and had never trained any of these dogs to harm anyone. The September 6th video clip you just saw happened 2 weeks before Henry was attacked. In that clip, Gibson also tells people who are watching that he's trying to rehome his cane corsos. And he says he just dropped the price to $5,000 per dog. Clearly, Gibson had not managed to rehome all of them when they attacked Henry 12 days later. But remember that in Gibson's attorney's statement, he said upon learning of this unfortunate accident, Mr. Gibson immediately made the difficult decision to rehome his dogs to a safe and loving environment. Now, if Gibson rehomed the dogs after the attack and after he knew that authorities wanted them and demanded that he turn them in, that could create some legal problems for Tyrese Gibson. First, authorities told him to turn the dogs over, not to rehome them. And authorities have a legal obligation to determine whether the dogs are dangerous. And they cannot do that if the dogs are rehomed and they don't know where they are. And secondly, if Gibson rehomes the dogs with anyone who does not know the full history of what's happened, he is opening himself up to the possibility of a very expensive lawsuit. Picture a situation where someone buys his dog without knowing it's been in a pack that killed Henry, and then the dog that was just sold attacks another neighbor's dog or a small child. That would be obviously very bad news for Tyrese Gibson, even more bad news. Now, in a recent statement, Tyrese Gibson told WSB that he has come back from Dubai and is currently in Los Angeles with his family mourning the loss of his father. But authorities are not going away, and they have not forgotten. Atlanta Police Captain Nicole Dwyer told WSB, "We're going to continue to come after him." So what do you think should happen to Tyrese Gibson? Are criminal charges here excessive? Does it change your mind if he really was away from home, out of town at the time the attack occurred? And what do you think should happen to the dogs? Is it reasonable to euthanize them, or is that too harsh? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video.